This video is about the append operator. This operator lets you combine multiple example sets to make a single larger example set which contains all of the examples from the inputs. You might use this, for example, to combine multiple small log files into one larger example set. The operator is very simple. The key point is that all of the input example sets must have the same type and number and name attributes. To show it working, I'm actually going to take the opportunity to show a number of other operators, and these are the generate data by user specification operator, the generate ID operator, multiply, set role, and rename. So we'll start with the process. I have a view here for it, so I'll run it once. Now here's the process. This is the append operator. It in fact has no parameters apart from this data management, which I always set to the default of double array. You'll notice it has multiple inputs. In fact, the number of inputs expands as you add more and more example sets. A new input port will appear. So for example, I can do this, and you can see a new input port appeared. And I'm taking this from the multiply operator, which we'll quickly deal with. Multiply, very simple operator, takes an input and just makes as many copies as you need on the output. Very useful. So what I'm doing in this case, I'm making a copy of the input example set and making 4 copies so I can show append working. I'm also generating some data using a combination of generate data by user specification and generate ID. There are some other operators I've commented out. I'll comment them back in later to cause the append operator to fail. So let's look first at the generate data by user specification operator. This lets you create an example set containing one example, and you can create attributes in that example set and give them names and values, and you can set the role of the attributes. So in this case, I'm creating 4 attributes with these names here and these values, and you can see I can provide numbers, strings, flags, true or false. I can also use the functions. Clicking on this button here brings up the full list of all of the functions which you may be familiar with from the generate attributes or generate macros operators. So the output from the generate data by user specification operator is an example set, and that gets passed to generate ID. This is another simple operator. This simply creates an attribute called ID, and its value is usually a number unless you check this box here, which will cause the values to be ID underscore something, i.e. a string. The generate ID operator itself ensures that all the examples within the example set have a unique ID. Obviously in this case we only have one example, so it'll be one unique value. Let's run the process to make sure that we understand the data. So there are 4 attributes and an attribute called ID. So if we remember the original generate data by user specification operator, 4 attributes were created in that: a nominal, a number, a date, and a binominal. A nominal, that's actually the label, hence it's coloured green. Statistics view, you can sure enough see a nominal label. There's one column, one attribute called ID, set to the value 1. The value 1 comes from here. If I set this offset to be 0, then the rule is the ID will start at 1. I can set that to be any offset I like, and in fact that's what I've done in these generate ID operators down below here. So I've set the ID to be offsetting from 1 in this case, and in this case I've set it to offset from 2. So if I were to set a breakpoint on this operator here rather than that one and run that, go back to the view here, this time the ID is 2 simply because the offset that I set was 1. Let's go back to the generate data operators. So the first path here, that generates one example in an example set. That's multiplied by 4, so there are 4 copies being sent to this append operator. These two Well, let's look at the values here. So again, I'm doing the same thing again. I'm choosing, well, the date and time will be subtly different because I'm running it as a data time, but the attributes are the same. The label is the same, and the ID generation is the same. And this last one, again, I'm just simply doing variations on a theme, really. I'm setting a binomial to be false in this case. So the end result of this is 6 example sets passed to the append operator. We can see that by break pointing before and running. Now what you're seeing is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tabs here showing data. So if I go on one of the multiply ones, you'll see each one of those should be identical. If I click on the generate ID 2, you can see it's the same example set in terms of attributes and so on, but the value for ID is different. If I click on ID 3 here, ID 3 is what I'm expecting to see. Sure enough, there it is. In this case, I'd set a binomial to false. So now if I run the append operator, what will happen is all those 6 will be joined together to make a single example set. Sure enough, there it is, and it's got 6 examples in it. And you can see the IDs. There are 4 IDs set to 1, which corresponds to the multiply operator, 1 with ID 2, 1 with ID 3, which was the false one. So you can see append is very simple in its operation, and but can sometimes be very useful. Now what we'll do is we'll just change some of the roles and the names to make the append operator fail. First thing we'll do is set the role of the label to be regular. So what I'm using for that is the set role operator. And what you do is you simply choose the attribute that you want to change the role of, and then you change its role to be whatever you want. I'm changing it to regular. You can also do additional attributes. It's the sort of familiar dialog box, and you can choose attributes here, and you can choose roles here, and you can even type your own text in here to create a role of your own desire. If I run that, I've not set any breakpoints. If I run that, that will actually succeed, but there is a little warning flag has come up, and you can see the details of that. If I do show view problems and bring that somewhere where we can read it, all example sets must have same attributes. Well, true. Turns out it's quite tolerant of it, but it's probably worth bearing in mind that it would actually run. And if you can see here, what's happening is that a nominal, which was a label, has now unilaterally been converted into a regular attribute. And that might be okay, but you just have to be aware that if you accidentally append things where the roles don't quite match, you can sometimes get successes where perhaps you shouldn't. You just have to be careful. It's not a particular problem. So what I'll do, I'll uncomment that so everything goes back to what it was. And what I'll do now is I'll put these in here, and I'll simply drag that to there. So now I'm going to join 7 example sets together, and you can see already there's a problem has been highlighted. If I again do show problems, this time it's feeling a lot less happy. There we go. So it's saying it's more worried about it this time. I think it would be fair. So if I run it this time, it fails, and the reason for that is we'll have to look at the data here. So I'm generating data in the usual way, but I've added an extra attribute which I've called extra, and sure enough, that's too much for it. It just doesn't know what to do, so it fails. Okay, so that's okay, that's good. So I'll just get rid of those 2 lines, those 2 operators rather, and I shall put a final one in it, which is to rename an operator. Now rename is simple enough. You give it an old name and a new name. The old name is in this case I've just chosen a binomial. I'm just going to change it to something else, and again it's feeling very upset about this. If I run it again, it will fail. So you can see, you do have to get it right, and it does do a reasonable job of telling you before you run it. It can succeed. You can manfully struggle on to get the right answer. But anyway, you'll find yourself using the append operator quite a bit because it's very useful just simply to join example sets together. So I'll leave with I'll run it through with everything working and just show the example set for a final view.